All right, had a little bit of a glitch, so if you're seeing this for the second time, well, yeah, I did it. I did it. It was me. I screwed up. This knucklehead right here. Yeah, started streaming but had the microphone turned off. So, had this great introduction going on. Life was good. Everything sounded great, and then I realized the mic wasn't on. So, I stopped streaming and turned it off and realized, oh, okay, the mic wasn't set properly because I used the recording device a little bit differently over the weekend. So then what happens? I get started. I'm having this amazing transition, and then I realize, oh God, screw up number two of the night. I never started the live stream on the makeup. So I did this amazing intro. It sounded fantastic, loved it, and I didn't stream it. So, welcome. Sorry I'm late. Welcome to Monday Night Josh, the word of Josh. Great to be here. Welcome back to the Coach's Corner. It's going to be part three of my amazing conversation with Coach Jamie Wagner, the 2006 Howard County, Maryland Football Coach of the Year. And this is part three of our incredible conversation. Coach Wagner and I probably talked for 4 or 5 hours. We realized we couldn't deliver everything in one episode, but everything we covered was just simply fantastic. It was an amazing conversation, very special to me because I lived it. I was part of this story. And being able to travel back with Coach Wagner and sort of revisit all of this amazing stuff, all of these amazing things that we were doing and that we were implementing and working together as a coaching staff really was an amazing time. And it was really something special to be a part of. And I hope you're enjoying the final part. Had so much content that we actually had to break up part three into two parts. So you're going to get to hear part three of my conversation with Coach Wagner tonight, and then we're going to broadcast part four on Thursday. So you get another 2 episodes of Coach's Corner this week and Word of Josh. So very excited, very thrilled to be able to present this to you. But before we go to my interview with Coach, I do want to focus on a couple of things. First and foremost, we are going to be doing a lot of amazing things with the Coaches Corner during the football offseason. We've got men's coaches, women's coaches. Really excited to have been talking to someone who's going to come on the podcast soon and talk all about girls softball. So a lot of amazing stories that you're going to be able to hear. And if you're a coach and someone who wants to coach or someone who's interested in coaching, and it doesn't matter the level, whether it's youth level, high school, college, professional, if coaching is something you're interested in, this series is definitely for you because you are going to hear stories from people who've done it, people who have achieved, people who have started leagues, people who have started programs, people who have resurrected sports programs, people who have come into programs that were really good and then took them to championship levels. You're going to hear from coaches who won championships year after year. You're going to hear from everybody. It is going to be amazing. I'm really excited that Coach Wagner was able to join me and be on for my first guest with the Coach's Corner. So humbled to have him as a part of this, and all of the great people who we worked with over the years at Centennial. Coach Howardell, Coach Ratucci, Coach Seglia, Coach Sinisi, Coach Dirk, Coach Bile. So many great people who we were involved with, and to be able to go through and coach with these men was one of the greatest honors of my life. And these episodes are dedicated to them and to everything that we went through and worked towards. But obviously, most importantly, Coach Wagner for being on the show, being our first guest on the Coach's Corner, and taking this trip down memory lane with me. Now, before I get to the interview with Coach Wagner, I do want to point out one thing. Today is the first day of NFL free agency, and people are already going nuts for the well, let's face it. Is it really the first day of NFL free agency? No, because the NFL had to come up with something called the legal tampering period. Yeah. So tampering's not legal. So the NFL decided, well, we'll have a legal tampering period. Like, this is so NFL, right? They had to come up with something different, like, and name it something that's totally ridiculous, like legal tampering. So here's how it came about. Years ago, the first day of free agency was always the first day of the league year, and everybody knew at the scouting combine in the days leading up, all these teams were having conversations because at the stroke of midnight, all of a sudden you'd get tweets and news reports of free agent deals being struck at like 12:01. I mean, that's a hell of a negotiation, right? If you're having your first contact with an agent at midnight and you have a deal at 12:01. So everybody was talking, everybody was negotiating, everyone was communicating. So the NFL came up with this nonsense of legal tampering. They couldn't just say free agency starts today, you can start negotiating, but you can't sign a contract for 72 hours. Basically, it's a moratorium for the start of contract signing. No, we had to come up with legal tampering, which I'm glad they did, because saying, well, free agency begins, but there's a moratorium on contracts, I guess that would be annoying, but really, legal tampering's not legal. So couldn't we have come up with something else? Couldn't we have just said the negotiation window instead of legal tampering? Good Lord, only in the NFL. But hey, I love the NFL. I love football. I'm counting down to the draft. I can't wait for the draft party that I'm going to go to this year, because we didn't get to go last year. And all these amazing things that we're going to hopefully get to do as vaccines get distributed. So anyway, we're not talking politics. We're not talking COVID. We're not talking anything other than sports, coaching, Word of Josh, Coach's Corner. Part 3 of my conversation with Jamie Wagner coming live right now. One last thing on NFL free agency. Ravens fans, chill out. Okay? I get it. The Ravens didn't sign Corey Davis. I get it. They didn't sign Kenny Holiday. I get it. They didn't sign Marvin Jones. They didn't trade 10 first-round draft picks for Allen Robinson. They didn't reincarnate Jerry Rice as a rookie and then, upgrade him. Calm down. Giants fans, calm down. Eagles fans, calm down. Washington football team fans, calm down. Everybody chill. It's March freaking 15th. Don't worry about it. You've got 6 months of free agency, the draft, wave 2 of free agency, guys getting traded, guys holding out, guys getting cut. The way the teams are going to look in a week is not what they're going to look like in 6 months when the season kicks off. You got 6 months until kickoff. Basically 175 days. Calm the F down. Okay? Everybody sit back. Take a deep breath and chill. And now, let's go to my conversation, part 3 of my talk with Coach Jamie Wagner. Enjoy, folks. Okay, so we talked about 2004. We talked about 2005. Season ends, couple of really big wins. The big shutout win against Oakland Mills, the big field goal for the victory over Reservoir. So now you're going into the offseason, coming up on year 3. And we haven't touched too much on this group yet. We talked a lot about the seniors for the 2004 season. But as we start going into the offseason, heading towards 2006, this was a pretty talented group of rising seniors at that point. They had a lot of success on JV with year 1 of the single wing, and a lot of athletic kids who were successful on the football field, and not just football. They had success playing basketball. They had success playing lacrosse. They had success playing baseball. I mean, this was a wrestling, track and field. This was a really athletic group of rising seniors who had sort of been growing with the program. They started, they were sophomores your first year, and then had a pretty talented freshman class join them. And now they're rising seniors coming into year 3. Talk about the end of the 05 season and what your thoughts are, and how do you go about planning for a season that's still like 10 months away, and so many different things will happen for these kids, but we also want to keep them focused on, hey, we just had 4 and 6 to kids may not be great, but as a coaching staff, we saw all the potential there, and we saw so many things starting to come together. Take me through your mindset of what happens? How do you approach an off season like that, particularly when it comes to your rising senior group?
Well, we were very fortunate. I think in the last couple of hours, we've talked about how, some of the things that happened that were turning out in our favor, we had some control over. Some things, as I said, sometimes things just happen such as this senior class we're about ready to talk about. They came in. It seemed like it was pretty well known around the community that this group of sophomores at the time were pretty talented. They were close friends, which we've talked about relationships more than we've talked about X's and O's. And I think that group coming in together, having a lot of experience together, as you said, in baseball and other sports, there was something special there. And because, we could see it developing, of course, honoring our current seniors and the next year. Well, here we are now. We're talking about this group who came in. Now here they are, they're seniors. So it's no surprise to us that we were hearing a lot about the potential. They were excited about it. Their parents were excited about it. And the one mistake that we could have made, and I'm thankful we didn't, was to take our foot off the gas. And we did not take our foot off the gas. We didn't just start coasting because, oh, thank goodness we have a really talented group coming in. Again, we did our best to try to identify the priorities and try to fix things that were fixable, control some things that were controllable. And then, of course, here we are leading into this year, which, as we know, turns out to be kind of special. And I think we as a staff, out of the corner of our eye in this off season, we knew what kind of kids we had. And I think this was a really good chance for us to start looking at ourselves, doing some things professionally, like professional development. This was a time for us as a staff to really say, we've implemented a lot of new things. Now let's take these months, let's recharge the batteries. Let's give the kids a little time to kind of get away, process all this excitement that they have. Of course, continue the weight program. Absolutely. There's no taking our foot off the gas in that regard. So let's talk about the weight room a little bit, and then we'll talk about kind of as a staff, what we took on. The weight room, and I have to say the weight room physically actually
it physically transformed.
It did. It really did. And again, we go back to the BFS program, we go back to the funding, and then Coach Ritucci, he created these achievement boards, these big whiteboards. And then we went in there one day and we just hung them up around the room. It looked pretty impressive. Mm-hmm. And the kids walked in that off season and really looked around and saw, wow, you know what? I want my name up there.
Yep.
And there goes the competition, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, all of a sudden, we don't have to wait till August to compete. Our kids are in the mindset right now in this off season. The competitive juices start flowing. They want to know how many reps their teammate just did because I'm going next.
Right. And I want to do it. I'm doing at least one more.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was so important to keep this grueling off season stuff fun.
Yeah.
And it really was fun. Like those boards were priceless. So the kids daily could see the growth of each other. They pushed each other. They competed against each other. Friendly competition. And I have to say that really, really, really did catapult us through grueling months of just, the winter months. They were competing constantly, and they actually enjoyed it.
And what I think was so interesting was prior to Coach Ritucci bringing those boards in, there was signage in there which had like different records and different things, but it hadn't been updated in like 10 years. So I know for me, it was always funny because I'd walk in, I'd be like, yeah, I played with that guy, that was my year. And I'm thinking like, you can't tell me no one's done anything since. But when you take a look at where we were a couple years prior, only a couple of kids ran a 40-yard dash time below 5 seconds. Right. So now, only a couple of kids could, do the 4 core lifts combined over 1,000 pounds. So when you talk about some of that competition, talk me up a little bit about some things that were done with the 1,000-pound club and the hard hats. There was a lot of the competition was there, and there was always the competition to be the best. But there was also this competition of, hey, I don't have to be the best to still achieve something great, like that 1,000 pound club. Like, yeah, maybe you didn't get to 1,500, which someone got to, but getting to 1,000, we made a pretty big deal. And that was a real, also, from my vantage point, I thought it was a big change in philosophy because we weren't focusing on implementation anymore. Now we were
Right.
focused on growth,
Mm-hmm.
as a program, as an athlete, as people. Talk about that piece though, and the way that that competition, like as a coach, what are you, if you're talking to a future coach right now, why was this so important to keep that competition going starting in like January when football doesn't start till September?
When you look at a student athlete who comes out for football, there's just this stereotype that everyone's big and strong, and like I hear kids say all the time, I don't know if I'm big enough. Well, there's a lot of positions on a football field. There's a lot of different skills that are needed, and I think that a lot of these competitions that you're referring to, really, it gives every type of body type, it gives every type of skill level something to achieve. Whether it's a 40 yard dash time, whether it's the 4 dot drill, it's a quickness and agility drill, maybe it's plyometrics, whether it's the heavy lifting, everybody in our program could kind of see where their strength was. And you know what? It's awesome to reward kids who achieve
Mm-hmm.
the max that they can, and reward the effort, but
Mm-hmm.
also reward the results.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, we gave out the hard hat. That was another brilliant idea. Kids want to walk away with a T-shirt. They want to walk, away with, not a trophy per se, but something that shows that they can kind of strut around a little bit and say, "I did it."
Yeah.
And I remember mentioning, just ago, we were talking about, if something feels good, we repeat it. That's just
Yep.
human nature. And what we were experiencing in that weight room was, it was no longer an experience where kids signed in, kind of kept staring at the clock,
Right.
waiting till when can I sign out? Maybe I could kind of sneak out and coach won't know.
Right.
That was gone.
Yeah.
That part was gone. The kids never thought about that. They enjoyed it, which was gold. They
Yeah.
wanted to be there.
Yeah, because I mean, look, I remember as a player, particularly going from my sophomore year to my junior year, my attitude wasn't right. And if you ever talk to Coach Holshoe, I don't know if he'd bring it up. I don't think he'd ever bring it up, but I'm sure if I said something in front of him, he'd probably talk about it. I mean, I didn't go in with a good attitude between my sophomore and junior year because it was, there's all these seniors. How much am I going to play? I don't really want to lift. And we talked earlier in our conversation about having regrets. That's my biggest regret when it comes to thinking about high school is I wasted the first part of my junior year because I had to get in shape. And I didn't go into that season in as good of shape as I could have been. And I got there eventually, and the season, worked out and I was able to accomplish some things. But I've always wondered, well, what else could I have done if I would have gone in shape? And like you said, that was gone at this point. Like people were coming to work hard. And even some players who maybe a couple years earlier, you didn't think would ever really be able to contribute. Well, not only are they showing up and working hard and getting stronger, getting bigger, they contributed not only to the team on the football field, but to the entire program.
Yes. And too often in life or in school, we hear the term peer pressure,
Mm-hmm.
always used as a negative,
Yeah.
always in a negative context. And I think that what started to develop here was positive peer pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And it was truly, leadership was kind of developing. Kids were taking ownership. They were becoming leaders amongst their peers. And I always say, it's a shame that kids associate peer pressure with only negative behaviors. But this I think was really a peer pressure in a real positive way. Leadership was occurring. Kids were They weren't just talking the talk, they were walking the walk. They were showing each other, helping each other through this, and it was priceless.
I think also the key was it was fun. Like, yes, you were there to work, but
Mhm.
it became fun. So like it wasn't that experience of being there and it's like you said, can I sign in and can I sneak out? Like
Mhm.
everybody, and when I say everybody, the students, the coaches, made the experience fun, whether it was the competition, encouraging everyone, if you great, it's great if you're hitting 225, but let's also celebrate your pal over here who just got to 175.
Correct.
Or the guy who never was able to lift more than the bar and is now able to lift a couple of blues and is benching, 135. Like we weren't seeing that in the past.
Mhm.
So you've got the kids already committed, working hard. Talk to me a little bit now. So the kids are doing what they're supposed to do. You mentioned this a little bit earlier, but now talk to me. Let's pivot back to the staff a little bit. Basically, the entire staff is coming back for 2006, with the exception of Coach Bile. He was moving schools,
Right.
and ultimately it just wasn't going to work out for him to teach at a different school and commute to Centennial based on where the schools were. But he never strayed from our hearts, and to this day is still part of that staff, even though he was on the other side for some games. But otherwise than that, the entire staff came back in '06. So talk to me a little bit about how do you motivating the staff not just to rest on the laurels of, hey, here comes a new group, here comes this group of kids that we all knew were special kids, but you made a comment back then that we owe it to them to get better as coaches so we don't waste this season. So talk about the preparation for that off season for your staff.
We were very fortunate. I remember mentioning earlier as well that, you know, when you have a coaching staff that's constantly a lot of turnover, coaches are leaving and coming, and that's a really difficult environment to coach in.
Mhm.
And we finally, for whatever reason, we finally established a staff that could stay, wanted to stay, and because you did this as well, we had coaches that maybe could have left, but they really sacrificed. I mean, they've families and other careers, and these are coaches who dedicated themselves and made themselves available. I mean, I don't know that the average person really understands the sacrifices that people make with their families to do this job. There's all kinds of odd times that you have to be there. If you have a 9 to 5 career, being in a high school at 2:15 is not easy.
Right.
People make a lot of sacrifices to be there, which is very appreciated. And I cannot even state that enough. The appreciation for staff continuing again to come back, because consistency is key, to come back. And also when the season's over, I think I was guilty of this way back in my career. When the season was over, I kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
I kind of went into my own world. I became a teacher again and things like that. And I apologize to Coach Holschuh right now. I could have done better and I should have. But that's the thing I really truly appreciate about our staff was, when the kids walked off the field that last game, we were right back at it. Like there was no break, there was no downtime. It was just getting back into the grind. And you mentioned this about an hour ago. The staff really did enjoy each other, which made all the hard work enjoyable. And I think that's what's happening with the kids too. Is I think our players enjoyed the hard work because they were doing it with the people they admired and they liked. They liked each other.
Mm-hmm.
They had good relationships amongst their friendships, and they were doing hard work because they got to spend time with people they liked. Our hard work, we got to do this, and it was grueling, but we did it with people that we liked, and it was really enjoyable. I mean, this was a chance for us to bond. Just a few of the things that we did once the season's over, right? We typically would sign up to go to a couple of the professional, the clinics.
Yep.
Professional growth. You got to keep learning. You got to keep finding out what's out there. So I know that we went to a couple of very general clinics, like the Nike clinic, very, very famous clinic from coast to coast. I know that our offensive staff would go to these clinics, and even though we had a really fine, a focus of the single wing, a lot of times we couldn't find that at the Nike clinic. I know our defensive staff really enjoyed the Nike clinics. A lot of good, useful.
That's because we got to hear from Nick Saban, who was like the dean of defense.
Exactly.
And Saban for as much of a bad rep as Nick Saban gets at these clinics. I remember him and Tyrone Willingham; those two stick out to me the most, and Jim Harbaugh actually too. You would not believe that these men were as successful big time coaches at the time. Willingham was still at Notre Dame, Harbaugh was at Stanford, and Saban at the time, I think the year I'm thinking Saban was actually after he left the Dolphins and went to Alabama. They talked to everyone in that room with the utmost respect and understood that they were there to help everybody. And man, did they give amazing information. And as a defensive coach, we were able to take a lot of that. And yes, you're right. From an offensive standpoint, a little bit different looking at single wing, but you found a solution to that too, especially going into the 2006 season.
Right. I do want to comment on what you just said. It is amazing when you attend these clinics. And in fact, every experience we had with other coaches, high school coaches, college coaches, pro coaches, how generous, how generous these people are. And that in itself is motivating, to really to see how generous people are, helping each other. Sometimes you can go to these clinics and the testosterone is so thick, and everyone's big and bad. No one wants to help each other, but that's nonsense, really. It's just really about a bunch of good people in a profession that they enjoy and they're sharing. And you guys got to meet with some of the greats for sure. So what our offensive staff did. We took advantage of certain clinics, sessions within the clinic, whether it's blocking schemes or whatnot. But really, we found our solution at the Single Wing Conclave. This is a very specialized clinic for coaches of the single wing. It started years ago with like 5 people in a basement, and the passion for old time football, single wing football, it grew. So they found that, their basement wasn't large enough, and eventually it grew. And I mean, really, this is old school. And then basically what ended up happening was they end up renting an auditorium at a college in Pennsylvania. So here's this group of coaches who share the experience. And now the experience is grown to needing an auditorium. When I say auditorium, at maybe 25 coaches at the first time in that auditorium, then it grew to 40, then 50. So we were really fortunate. We found this, we attended every year. And this is where the offensive staff really came home. I mean, you want to talk about juices flowing, ready to implement some stuff. This is where we got our batteries recharged, was at that clinic. So, we did do a lot of different things. As you said, any kid who's going to put on the pads, any kid who's going to dedicate their time to us, we need to make sure we are getting better every day too, because they're pledging to, we need to pledge to. So, we did some other things as well, but yeah, the clinics were really energizing places for us.
Yeah. And I think what really also where things took another level with that off season, obviously, you were never afraid to do some shifting within the staff in terms of sliding people around. And this offseason, Coach Ritucci moved from the defensive side of the ball over to the offense. And we were kind of 3-3 this season with Coach Ritucci over on offense with you and with Coach Hallwaddell. And then it was Coach Segley and Sinisi and myself on the defensive side. But I think a real big thing that really started happening was the emergence of our relationship with Emory and Henry. And obviously a big piece of that was due to your brother-in-law with Coach Montgomery. But the way Coach and his entire staff took to us as a program is going way beyond just family ties. Like I remember a picture of you and Don sitting on a beach that summer talking football that I think your wife snapped. And I remember just thinking, God, I would love to know what scheme they were talking about at that point.
Yeah.
But Coach Montgomery really took it to an entirely different level with the support, not only during the offseason, but constantly for his support for Centennial football, which, let's face it, was almost 6 hours away from where his campus was. What did that do for the program and that relationship with Emory and Henry?
Wow. Like, do we have 3 hours?
No.
I hope I can do this justice in the amount of time we have here, because when I first met Coach Montgomery, I was scared to death. I mean, here was a man who, coached for basically 3 decades at Mount Union, a powerhouse program. And the key is, when you look at the powerhouse that Mount Union became, he was there when it wasn't that.
Right.
And so he, he saw that come in and just become what it was. And then once you're at the top, it's tough to stay at the top. So, he had that experience. He takes his career to a different place, becomes the head coach. He's taking over a program at Emory and Henry, way down southwest tip of Virginia, beyond Blacksburg, near Virginia Tech. And he starts building his program there. So that the time I meet Coach Montgomery, believe it or not, as crazy as this sounded to me, we were like in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
Here's this man with many achievements, and here we were, almost mirror imaging of the program and what we're trying to do. So it was like having Google right there across the dinner table. Like, any question I had, he had an experience that he had to address that before. And so I can't even put a value on it. It was priceless. He went through these things. He was able to share his experiences with me. So valuable. And then he invites us down to meet with his staff. And you talk about generous, thoughtful people. Just amazing. Like, Coach, tell us what you need. Tell us what you want. We're going to plan our day around your needs. Where do you hear that, right? Here's a college staff who has so much on their plate, and yet here they are blocking off a series of days for us to simply say, hey, what do you need? We'll give you whatever you need. We'll talk, and just pick our brain. And that's what they did. And when you leave something like that, it is so inspirational to see people going through what you're going through, but they've done it before, and they've been successful, and here they are, they're sharing their secrets with you. Mm-hmm. So really, every time we returned from Emory and Henry, we really felt like there were 10 things, 20 things that we could implement as soon as we came back.
Yeah. And that was, so this was the first year, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, because we'll get to this, but we introduced Eagle Warriors this year, which I know was something we picked up directly from Emory and Henry.
Correct.
And I could tell you what always stood out to me about the relationship with Emory and Henry, and specifically with Don. Whenever he was around, it was football season. So if he was in town visiting, I could count on 3 things. There's going to be a trip to Jilly's. May Jilly's rest in peace. There was going to be a lot of football talk, and there was going to be a ton to learn. And what I think was so special was we started having that connection to the next level for the program. Mm-hmm. And while, Emory and Henry was one school, you still had that connection to the next level. So all of a sudden, kids are getting introduced to a college coach, literally in the house, getting to know them, see them, and getting to understand and hearing that, oh, I could have a shot. And we did some other things that off season too. You talk about what Coach Montgomery and his staff did. We had a similar experience that year with the football staff at Johns Hopkins. Same thing. And you talked about this earlier, the fraternity and the brotherhood of the sport. And I would imagine it's there in other sports too.
Mhm.
The way people will open up and say, how can we help you? Because the one thing I know about coaches, we all want to talk shop as much as we can because you can't talk about it with the average Joe. I
Right.
can't sit around with my brother in law who loves football and sit around with a whiteboard and draw up schemes and concepts and have a discussion about what we could do differently because they don't get it. Whereas you could sit down with your brother in law, draw up on your whiteboard, and you can actually literally have an X's and O's discussion, and one play could last 4 hours.
Right. And you're exactly right. And one of the parts of the relationship with Don was, the fact that he was transitioning from a defensive coordinator to a head coaching position, and his journey in that transition. There were a lot of new experiences for him. So
Yeah.
we got to share a lot of those experiences together. I was constantly picking his brain and asking him about how did he address some of these. I mean, as we said several times today, football is X's and O's, but it's about people. And the hardest part in the job sometimes is just making sure your people are taken care of and aligned and put where they need to be, and that everyone's rowing in the same direction.
Yeah.
It's a very simple cliche, but if you really think about that in life, this is a hard enough job when everything's going well. And if everyone's not rowing in the same direction, you're not going anywhere.
Right.
And those are so many valuable lessons I learned from the relationship with Coach Montgomery is really about people. And of course, a lot of X's and O's and football, but really learning about people was so valuable.
So we talk about, we've talked about the staff now and everything that they're doing. We've talked about the kids and everything that
Yes.
they're doing.
Mhm.
Now we sort of have to come back because now we're traveling through the off season, if you will. And now it's the point where we sort of start getting back together.
Mhm.
We're getting towards the springtime now. It's creeping a little bit closer. We still got a ways to go. There's still a spring sports session, but now it's where you have to really start having your plans and focusing on, goals. What do you do to put this season together? Because the one challenge that we sort of uncovered a little bit, while we had a lot of these kids who were very talented and very motivated, there are also times, depending upon where we were in the offseason, where football is the last thing on their minds. They're focused on other sports. They're focused on their academics. They're focused on just being a kid, being a teenager. But we still want to make sure we've got that connection. So, as we sort of travel through the off season to
Mhm.
August 15th of 2006, talk to me a little bit now about, working with the students together again as coaches, but obviously we're not on the field.
Well, one of the things that I learned in my conversations with Coach Montgomery is, he once posed a question to me. He said, "Have you ever asked your players what their goals are? You ever asked a kid what their goals are?" And my head was spinning. We've been through so much, and I was disappointed that I had to say, no, I really haven't. I haven't. And this was, I think, really opened up the doors to an important connection that we've been getting at here today. Really, if you think about how many times did we say that you want your seniors to have their ideal dream season? And how many times did we say that when you see those kids peeling off the pads for the last time, literally tears of regret, that how painful that is as a coach, right? You see those kids, and what do you say to a kid at that time? Really, this is not a video game. You can't pause it and rewind it.
Right.
You can't just say, you know what, X out, let's start again. And life is unique compared to technology these days, and our kids are so into technology. Like you can't rewind. You don't get another shot.
Right.
So it was really important for us to get that message across. And when I was asked the question, did I ever ask a kid what their goals were? I really started to look into that and ask Coach Montgomery about that. So would it be okay if I started talking a little bit about the path we took for our seniors
Yeah,
with goals?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do it.
So because we didn't want to have regrets, one of the things I don't think we mentioned yet was our program before we were there had about 28 players in the program. On the varsity program.
Right.
Now here we are in 2006, and we have 38 players in the varsity program. So 28 to 38, that's a jump. It's an important jump in football, but it doesn't seem significant. We had, out of those 38 varsity players, we had 26 seniors. 26 seniors, very unusual, very special. And as we referred to a few moments ago, our senior class was very talented. So we wanted to make sure that such an amazing group of kids, student athletes, they didn't have any regrets. This was the perfect storm of getting ready to form. And so we wanted to make sure that we talked to them about goal setting and made sure they were totally aware of what is available to them in life. As they move forward in life, out of football and into the real world. So we set up things called senior meetings. And again, thanks to Coach Montgomery, he said, listen, you want your seniors, the leaders in that group, to be leaders, right? As we said a few moments ago, maybe an hour ago, we said, the more you invest, the more you care. The more you care, the more you're willing to work. And so we wanted to make sure our seniors could really see what was in front of them. So we had what we called senior meetings, which means we had 26 seniors, and we set up individual meetings with the senior and their parent. So this was just the player and their parents, and we met with them in their home if they chose that to be the location, and right. Many did. So basically, we would, in June, this is the really important detail here, is this occurred in late June. So right. School is now over. Their senior year starts now, right? Not on August 15th.
Right.
If we talk about this on June 15th, your senior year just got 2 months longer.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, and those 2 months are crucial. What can happen in those 2 months, whether the difference between laying on your couch in air conditioning for 2 months or getting out there and doing something about it, right?
Right.
So we sat down with kids and their parents, and we introduced what goal setting was. Shockingly, many had no idea. So we basically wanted to start out by saying, we sit around and wish for things to happen quite often. Like, oh, I hope we have a great season. I wish we could win 6 games. Wishes you have no control over.
Right.
So this was the moment where we wanted to let the kids know a really important secret about life. You have more control over the outcome than you think you do. And so here we go. We're going to talk about goals. Okay. So we sit down with the players individually with their parents, and having the parent there was really important.
Yep.
Because they got to witness something that many of the parents, believe it or not, didn't get to do. And that was listening to their kids talk about their goals and and what they want out of life. Sometimes those conversations don't happen in a home. So basically we sat down and we said, listen, all I'm going to ask you to do today during this meeting is you're going to come up with 3 goals you have for this football season, because it is your senior year. And I'm going to ask you to come up with 3 goals you have for the school year as a student. And I also want to go beyond Centennial, and I want you to tell me 3 goals you have for life after high school. And so So we sat down and we let them think and we let them speak. This is all about their ideas and their goals. And as soon as they would tell me something, I said, okay, now that's a dream unless you have a plan. Once you create a plan, it now becomes a goal. Right. So let's talk. So we went item by item. This is what you want. What's your plan? For example, coach, a kid might say, well, I didn't play that much last year as a linebacker. I would love to be the starting linebacker this year. Sounds like a great wish to me. However, what's your plan? Well, I have to get faster. Perfect. How do you think you can do that?
Right.
Well, I know you guys are at the days a week in the summer working on speed and conditioning. Perfect. I'm going to write that down. So you're going to go to BFS 3 days a week. You're going to improve your speed. How else can you become the starting linebacker? Well, I can learn the fundamentals of the game a little bit better. Well, okay, like what? Well, why don't you pop in some game film, an NFL game if you wish, and stare at the offensive guard, for example, right? Mm-hmm. Read the center, guard, and the backfield motion, and then pause it. And what's your first step going to be? I said, if you improve your recognition step, if you improve the recognition of the play that's about to develop, you just got faster without improving your speed.
Right.
If you can mentally
get faster.
Yes. Yeah. So again, we can't go through every detail, but basically everything they said they wanted to do, we came back and tied it to something they can control. All the way down the list for their grades. And the parents were there, coach. And, I've studied goal setting ever since Coach Montgomery talked to me about it. And I'm terrorized to see that one of the new ideas coming out recently in like 2020, 2021 is, they say, don't share your goals with other people. I think it's the opposite. I like the old school method because as soon as you share them with someone, now that other person can help hold you accountable.
Right.
If you never tell your parents your goals, then when you say, oh, I'm just going to sleep in today, they'll go, okay, go back to bed. Well, no, if you tell your parents your goals and you say, I'm going to sleep in today, they're going to say, wait a minute, didn't you say that this is the morning you're going to work on distance running or or whatnot, right? So right. When you share your goals with a trusted adult, you now have a team of people helping you accomplish your goals. Right. And I'm a big believer in that because it's so easy to wiggle out. When things get tough, so easy to wiggle out of a situation. And really what we did is we made sure we told these seniors, set your goals and do not back down. This is your one and only senior year. It starts today in June. And you know what? You control you, but you know what? You also have a special power here as a senior. This is your football program too. If you see somebody else wearing the C who is getting in the way of you accomplishing your goals, you need to get on them a little bit. Mm-hmm. Again, positive peer pressure. Encourage people to step up. I'm not talking about bullying, of course, that'd be ridiculous, but we're talking about encouraging each other to reach their goals. Wow, what does that do to a team?
Well, right. And if you're the one on the team not doing your part, everybody plays a role, and it doesn't matter whether it's you're the starter who's playing every snap to the one who may only get 4 or 5 snaps a week, but you're so critical during the week in helping the team prepare. And I think that gets lost a lot with everybody, because let's face it, when you go through the dog days of summer and go through a tough week of practice, your reward is the game. So it's a challenge when you don't get as many reps, but what you're bringing to the table is always critical. And going back to these senior meetings for just a second before we move on, what I thought was so great about them was it really was a sort of a taking down of the barrier between coaches and parents as well, because if someone's skeptical of what you're doing, or someone doesn't like what you're doing, or someone doesn't believe, or maybe they do, but they're still not happy with the result. Like we as a staff saw major growth going from 1-8 to 4-6,
Right.
and we could see the big picture. Sometimes as a parent, you're not always seeing that. You're seeing you're a little more have a little more tunnel vision, if you
Mm.
will, because everything's centered around your child and where your child fits into that space. These meetings broke those barriers down and people were able to have those conversations, but they saw the relationship. We've talked about this throughout the entire conversation, the relationships that you're building with your team, with that player. You dedicated a specific amount of time to come to their home, talk to their son, and talk to him not only about the upcoming season, the upcoming academic year, but about the rest of their life. You're showing that investment in them. And I always felt that was so critical because that's where a lot of parents got to really say, everything came together. I got that. I understand everything that this program is trying to do.
Right. And it's a good point that, the parents do see a lot of the changes that we've made. And sometimes they don't understand why. Sometimes people think we change for the sake of change. And then I think you're right. This component of everything really tied everything together. Now they're like, you know what? I can see now. Like I can see why 2 months ago this was done. Now it's all coming together. It makes sense. Um, the parents and the kids, actually, it opened the door for some discussions. I don't want to get into specifics because there were a couple times, one time in particular, where I had to kind of step back, figuratively from the kitchen table to let the parent and their son have a separate conversation about this process. And I think it was really good. I felt a little awkward that I was witnessing this because this is a conversation that clearly has never taken place with them before, but it opened up a door to them speaking to each other about things. So it was really valuable. And was it time consuming? It was, but it was so worth it. I mean, the investment, the payouts triple of what the investment was. There's no question.
I think what also is unique is this, we're focusing a lot on the seniors getting ready for the upcoming season, but there were some special juniors on this team who had sort of grown, developed, if you will, over the last couple of years, who were really critical too. And I think what was so great was they were as equally as invested as the seniors. Like you didn't know, and when I'm thinking of a couple of them, I'm thinking obviously about Coach Mo and Tusa Matsui, for instance. Those are two who stick out. You wouldn't have known that they weren't seniors because everything our seniors were doing, Colin and Tusa were doing. We had Big Tim Thier, taking that next step. Into our program that year. So you had a lot of the younger, like everything that was going on was infectious all throughout the program. And that was so critical because we had a big group down on the JV level, and we talked about the JV, and we also had a massive influx of talent coming in with this freshman class. So it was really special to have this senior class that was loaded. You had a junior class which wasn't as big, but you had a lot of kids who could really contribute in key areas. And then down on the JV level, you had a talented group of sophomores and an equally talented group of freshmen coming in with a lot of replenished talents. And a lot of that comes to what we talked about during the early parts, which was making sure our relationships with the youth programs were in place, our relationships with the middle school programs were in place, and all of a sudden, while you're having these meetings with seniors in June, I'm having meetings with freshmen and recognizing, oh dear Lord, where am I getting 80 helmets for tryouts for just the JV squad that June? So all of this is taking place, And that clock just keeps ticking. Like it's a long off season, but all of a sudden you have no time to get anything done.
Right. And this this portion of the our conversation really does honor the seniors because they were amazing.
Yeah.
But really what's happening is kind of the vision. And that was really, we believe that one program where everyone is equally valued. I think it's starting to just seep from grade level to grade level.
Yep.
And you're right. I mean, I wish we could talk so much about the JV season because, and I think we will certainly touch on that. I certainly hope
Yeah.
we do. But I mean, just what a special year. There's no question.
Yeah. There's no doubt. And then I think the other thing, which was the last big piece of this offseason, with the seniors especially buying in,
Mhm.
they were already invested, but and I've always felt this way. I always felt those senior meetings put it over the top in terms of helping really understand. It was almost like, okay, you've been here for 2 years. Now I'm going to share with you the secret. Here's what's in Marcellus wallet from Pulp Fiction. Here's what's in the briefcase, if you will. It was almost that, let me let you in on the full state secrets, if you will. And I remember 7-on-7 tournaments were picking up speed that summer. And I remember this group of kids going out there and just lighting it up and turning heads to the point of, oh, is Centennial going to run a spread this year? Are they going to do something different? Are they moving away from single wing? Or is it, oh, this team's pretty athletic?
Right.
Where'd all these kids come from? And you knew they were already there, but all of a sudden it was, everything just started going to the next level. Um, and those kids bought in and were ready to go.
They were. And again, we talked about how, our responsibility as a staff is to take the talent and the athlete we have and not try to put a square peg in a round hole, right? So
Right.
when we started to see the talent that was in the program at this point, this was another step in the process of expanding our vision, not going away from the single wing, but this is where, for example, Coach Ritucci was basically saying, you know what, listen, look at this group, look at the athletes we have, look at the speed we have. This is where we take the single wing concept and we don't go away from it. We don't, not quitting on it, but we're going to alter it. We're going to put more spread single wing in. And this is where, as I said earlier, X's and O's are not my strength. There are people on our staff significantly more football IQ than I am with the X's and O's. And this is where this is the perfect time to pass the baton in the offensive concept of the single wing to Coach Ritucci and say, you know what, you understand the matchups that are out there. You understand game planning and the talent we have. And this is where we kind of take the single wing to the next level to really not just do what we want to do, but do what we have to do to go over the top.
Yeah, and Coach Ritucci really had that understanding of matchups and how to, you hear about this in football a lot. You can have the greatest schemes, you can have the greatest this, but you have to understand how to put a player in the right place to make plays and take advantage of their skill set. And Coach Ritucci really had that vision and that understanding of how to say, okay, this player gives me this,
Right.
this player gives me this. So if I can design this, here's the outcome. And we'll hit on a little bit of that as we talk about a couple of the games coming up. And that was on the offensive side of the football. And then, pivoting to Coach Sinisi just for a second on the defensive side of the football, he morphed his entire system as well that year. The system didn't change, it expanded. We had done a lot out of that base 50 look. for the first 2 years. It's kind of what we needed based on what our personnel was. But coach spent a lot of time tweaking it. It was a little bit more of a 5-3 look more than anything, um, or a 5-2 with a little bit more of a safety close to the line. And then in this year, it morphed into more of a true 5-2 look, but also had an entire concept of a 40 look and a 4-man front. And coach understood how to teach it in such a simplistic way to the kids that there was none of this, like you read in the NFL all the time is, well, we run a 3-4. Well, this team runs a 4-3. And Coach Sinisi had the easiest explanation to say, yeah, I'm just taking a nose tackle out and putting in an extra linebacker, and we're just making sure we have all the gaps covered. There was none of this personnel is a 50 or this personnel is a 40. Coach had that vision to understand that 1 week we're going to play River Hill, who's running more of a spread wing T, but the next week we might be playing Glenell, who's running a power I, and the next week we might be playing Wild Lake, who traditionally is running a wishbone.
Right.
So he had that vision going into that season and understood the personnel, how to build that, and how to ask those questions. And again, to take advantage of the talent he had. And the biggest thing that he did going into the season, and I don't know if it was planned or I don't know if it evolved that way, was he arguably took his best linebacker from the previous 2 seasons with Alex Becta. And because Alex played such a pivotal role on the offense, Alex didn't play as much defense his senior year, but when he played, it was so impactful. And it wasn't so much that Alex wasn't capable of going both ways. It's A, there was more talent.
Yes.
And B, you were able to take advantage of Alex's strengths. So when he was in there, he was able to do what he did best. And it was a win for both sides of the ball. And this was a kid who still made some incredible, timely defensive plays. And a lot of that came back to Coach Sinisi's vision, because he made some tweaks. They weren't major, but they were huge, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Absolutely it does. Yeah. And you're right. And that's great coaching. Like, that is great coaching. It is having the idea, having the knowledge, the idea, and then implement it, be able to teach it. Right. I think I said a couple hours ago, it doesn't matter what we know if we can't get it across to the kids. And just that, you just explained a perfect example of great coaching. And there's 1,000 stories like this year. Just our defense, so much of this process, we mentioned the single wing because it was so weird. It was so unique. It was so odd. Bizarre, really, for a lot of people. And the unsung hero of perhaps this year, if not longer, it's our defense. Our defense never got talked about, and they flew under the radar. And I mean, you want to talk about maybe one of the best defenses in school history. Mm-hmm. And it got overshadowed by the fact that we implemented this bizarre offense. And you know what? I guess ultimately all that matters is when you look at our defense won so many games for us. And it's all about winning, right? And that's what this season's about.
Absolutely. All right, there you have it. That was part 3 of my conversation with Coach Jamie Wagner. Amazing stuff. And, for those of you who are kind of tuning in, hoping to hear all about the 2006 season, for those of you who are a part of it, don't worry, the wait's almost done. Thursday night, we're going to present part 4, the conclusion, if you will, of my conversation with Coach Wagner. But, as you hear about all this stuff and you listen to some of the things we're talking about, so much of what we're actually talking about has nothing to do with X's and O's, with chalk talk, with schemes, with strategies. Everything is all about building a program and building a team and understanding how to put your team together. And it's really easy to look at a team in any sport. It doesn't have to be limited to football. Um, so much of what happens in the off season is what translates to what happens during the season. And I'm not talking about recruiting, and I'm not talking about free agency or drafts on the professional level. You're really talking about what you're implementing with your core athletes at any level, because you ultimately are building with who's in your program today. And then anything that's joining in September, in the case of football, it's kind of like a bonus because you don't know what you have. All you know what you have is with the players that are in your program at that time, and then you're building and building and planning based on all of those athletes and taking advantage of what their strengths are and what's going to put them in the best position to have success. And if you really look at any sport, professional, college, high school, youth leagues, everything everything that happens during the season, a lot of it's going to translate to what happened prior to the season. And when I think about the 2006 season at Centennial and everything that this entire incredible coaching staff was working on, everything was in preparation for what was ahead. We knew what we wanted to do. We knew what changes we had to make to schemes and systems, but we weren't going to change who we were and what we were all about, which was a tough, smart, physical team that was going to be aggressive, that was going to run the football. We were going to stop you from running the football. We were going to throw the ball when we had to. We were going to stop you from throwing the ball. And you're doing all those things based on the personnel that you have, based on the players that we had in the program, and adjusting to fit their strengths. And all of this is happening. We haven't even talked about day one of practice that year yet. And you're taking everything that happened in the prior seasons and everything that you think could happen coming up and put it all together. And then you make tweaks along the way. Things don't always work out as planned. And week by week, you're going to make adjustments. You're going to make tweaks. You know, we're not even touching scouting. Coach and I haven't talked about, the preparation that went in, just breaking down film, getting ready for each game. Because that's a process in and of itself. I can think of what high school coaches I know and what we've all talked about over the years of what we're doing to get ready. I can only imagine what that's like at like a college program like Alabama, or for a guy like Joe Paterno, who's no longer with us. I can only imagine how much film and game tape Coach Paterno would watch, or Bobby Bowden. All of these. And then, we talked about Mount Union, and we talked about Emory and Henry and coaches like Don Montgomery. The amount of tape that these men, these professors of football, have watched over the years to understand. I guarantee you, there's not one game that a coach like Coach Montgomery went into where he didn't know exactly what the other team was going to do, and wasn't. He was never, no coach out prepared him. He was always prepared. And a lot of these coaches are always prepared. And at Centennial, we were always prepared. We may not have always had the best from year to year, but we were always prepared. Nothing ever really caught you off guard. Does a play get through once in a blue moon? Sure. But by and large, you're going in understanding what your opponent's going to try to do to move the football on you. So we went in understanding what we had to do to try to stop them from moving the ball. And offensively, we went in knowing what we wanted to do to move the football. We went in with a pretty good idea of what the other teams would try to do to stop us from moving the football. But when you're running an offense like single wing, people get creative. The crazy circuits start rolling in someone's head, and maybe you're going to do something outside the box against an offense that's a little bit more unorthodox. But everything comes down to preparation. Preparation is such a big part of coaching sports. And for anybody who wants to be a coach at any level, it's not going to be about what you do on game day. Game day, all the hard work had to have already been done to get you to game day. Game day is where you put it all together. It's like my when I played JV football at Centennial, Coach Altieri used to always say, every practice we're like putting a deposit into the bank, or we're putting a deposit in, and then game day is payday. That's where we're taking out the money and we're going to buy what we want. Obviously you're not buying anything, but you get my drift. And that's what it's all about. You've got to be able to prepare as a coach. You've got to be able to do all these things. And again, everything Coach Wagner and I just talked about for the last hour, none of it had to do with anything that was on the field in terms of actual preparation. It was all preparation to get to the first day of practice, to get to the first scrimmage, to get to the first game. And I guess just like football, we're going to put it all together this Thursday night, part 4 of the first ever Coach's Corner. Never expected when I first reached out to Coach Wagner that we would go on to talk for close to 5 hours, if not a little bit longer. And to be able to put this together in a 4-part story and take this trip down memory lane. And again, for all the players who were involved, there are too many to name. And if I left a name out, which I know there were a lot of names that I didn't mention, trust me, you're not forgotten by any means, and you weren't not important. Every single one of you were important. Every kid I ever coached was special and was important and played a vital role in Centennial football. And there were a lot of them. And a lot of these young men, particularly from this season, I think they're all in their 30s now. They might be like 32 now. So, they're not they're not kids anymore. And, they're grown adults now, and it's been several years, but it was a blast, and it was an honor and a privilege to be able to work with them as a coach and hopefully have an impact on them and have an impact on their lives. I can only speak for myself. The coaches that I had, the Ed Holshoes, the Joe Novotnys, the Stan Kimballs, the Jim Hoppers, the Steve Fisters, Greg and Darren Altieri, these men as my coaches, every single one of them had an impact on me in my life as a student, as a professional within business, and of course as a football coach. And you can only hope when you're coaching that you can have that type of impact. And that's what this story with Coach Wagner is all about. The impact that we're able to have is because of all the things that went in to getting ready to play football. So I hope you enjoyed part 3. Part 4 is coming this Thursday night, March 18th, day after St. Patty's Day, March 18th, 9 o'clock, right here, Facebook, Word of Josh page. You can watch it live. If you're not into watching podcasts, and hey, I can't blame you, it's a long interview. You can download this and listen to us anywhere you like to enjoy listening to your podcast to, whether it's on a treadmill, an elliptical, in the car, taking a walk, taking a run, taking a bike ride. You can head over to iTunes. You can head over to Spotify. You can head over to Google Play. You can head over to Amazon. Wherever you like to get your podcast, you can find the Word of Josh podcast there. Thank you very much for joining me for this particular episode of Word of Josh, the Coach's Corner, and I will see you Thursday night. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.